declare the Ordinary Council meeting of the 21st of February 2023 held in Council Chambers at the City of Subiaco open at 5:32pm. Welcome councillors, staff, the media, people from Shenton Park and everyone else in the gallery. On behalf of the City of Subiaco, I acknowledge the Whadjuk Noongar people as the traditional custodians of the area. We recognise their cultural connection to the land and waterways of Subiaco and their continuing contribution to our city. We pay respect to their elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Please note that this meeting is being live streamed and recorded, and by being present at this meeting, members of the public consent to the possibility that their image and voice may be published online. Attendances. We've got all elected members present, the majority of which are in person, and we've got Councillor Hammersley attending by Zoom. So in accordance with the Local Government Administration regulations, we'll be conducting this meeting through a hybrid of in-person and electronic attendance. Assisting us tonight is the CEO and his executive leadership team, comprised of the Director Technical Services, Director Development Services, Acting Director Corporate Services, who is Lee Guillaume tonight, and Acting Director Business Improvement, and that's Paul Mole. Okay, there's no apologies. We've got some requests for leave of absence, beginning with Councillor Rick Powell, who's requested leave for the period 28 June to the 7th of July 2023, inclusive. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Stroud and Councillor Kosovich. All those in favour? Anyone against? Okay, that's approved unanimously. There's a second request, and it's from Rick Powell also, Councillor Rick Powell. He's requested a leave of absence for the period 27 July to the 26th of August 2023, inclusive. A mover and a seconder, please. Councillor White and Councillor De Vries. All those in favour? Anyone against? No. It's carried unanimously. Are there any disclosures of interest this evening, councillors? Doesn't look like there are, so we'll move on to public question time, there being no previous public questions that were taken on notice. So the first public question comes from Paul Greco of Bagot Road, Subiaco. Mr. Greco.
Thank you. So this is regarding the 60 Bagot Road planning application. So in the supporting documentation for this proposal, the planning officer notes the following. Prior to use of the development, the hereby approved management plan dated 12th of January 2023 shall be amended to include the following. A code of conduct, B, a critical response plan, C, further information regarding the handover procedure. I note that the code of conduct and critical response plan are not part of the attachments for this application, and the handover procedure is only one bullet point long. So my question is, have these documents been received, assessed and approved by the officer?
Director Development Services, can you answer that?
Thank you for your question, and through you, Mayor. So the Planning and Development Local Planning Schemes regulations, there's a clause in there, clause 74, and that provides the ability for conditions of approval to request further details to be included in the management plan, and these need to be provided prior to the commencement of the use should it be approved. So condition 2, as recommended, requires further details associated with the plan, including refining and expanding on the management plan for a code of conduct, critical response plan, and more details on the handover procedure. The management plan was reviewed and assessed by officers as part of considering the proposal, and the changes to these documents will not substantially change the development should it be approved.
Your second question.
My second question again regarding the 60 Bagot Road application. So this proposed that this mental health hospital is a community purpose facility, but it seems very different from what I would expect a community purpose facility to be, which is sort of like a town hall, a cultural centre or a club room. One major difference I see is this proposed facility will sleep up to 450 different people a year. So would it be acceptable to the city if other community purpose facilities were to accommodate people, hundreds of people a year, such as the Rotary Club of Subiaco or the Subiaco Scout Hall? Would this be an acceptable proposal too?
Mr. Petrosky.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. So the city's local planning scheme number 5 includes a definition for community purpose, and it means premises designed or adapted primarily for the provision of educational, social or recreation facilities or services by organisations involved in activities for community benefit. As outlined in the report to Council, officers consider the proposal as most closely aligned with the community purpose land use, and it's acknowledged that this land use is broad and includes a wide range of organisations and services, and the appropriateness of the land use as recommended is subject to Council determination this evening. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Greco. The next question comes from Pippa Park of Bagot Road. It's in relation to C3 also.
I've heard my mum and dad talk about this getting approved only if it was less impact of a residential zone into a mental health facility. I'm only in year 10, but it sounds like to me this is a lot more impact than it ever has been. How do you honestly think this is less impact to our everyday life?
Director of Development Services.
Thank you, through you, Mayor, and thank you for your question. When we were preparing the report for Council consideration, officers compared the existing use to that of what the proposed use is of community purpose. Council will consider our recommendation in the report and additional information from public questions and statements in making their determination this evening. The conditions of planning approval are recommended in the report to Council, and these are commonplace in planning applications. These provide for compliance with an approved use.
Your second question?
I've lived here since 2009. All my childhood memories over the weekends and weekdays. I never remember anyone ever being there. We used to play in the pool every day, and when our balls would often go over the fence, and when we would try to get them, no one was ever there. Do you actually believe them?
Mr. Petrovsky.
Thank you for the question, through you, Mayor. So, as commonplace with most development applications, officers conduct a site inspection of the premises, and that's what we do to confirm its present use. And we've done that in this instance.
Thank you. The next question comes from Khan Saleh of Bedford Avenue, Subiaco, in relation to item C3.
A small office space for charity administration and a call center in a residential zone does not have the individuals attend or reside at the property 24/7. The new proposal is not more similar to a residential home simply because they are sleeping on site. Given this fact, how do you determine that this mental health accommodation is less detrimental impact to the locality?
Why don't you ask all of your questions and then we'll deal with them all in one go. Okay, I thought what you submitted had a few parts to it, but if you're happy to leave it at that, then Mr. Petrovsky.
Thank you for your question, and through you, Mayor. So, as I mentioned previously, conditions of planning approval are recommended in the report to council. And again, this is commonplace in planning applications, and this provides for compliance with whatever that approved use might be. Currently, the non-conforming office use operates without any conditions of planning approval, and the intensity of the use may change into the future. This current proposal is capable of approval in accordance with Clause 23 of the City's Local Planning Scheme if the use is less detrimental to the amenity of the area than the existing non-conforming land use, and if the proposed use is closer to the intended purpose of the zone on which the land is situated. It is open for council to determine the use is less detrimental, similar, or more detrimental, and this information is in the report to council.
The next question is from Jess Park of Bagot Road in relation to item C3.
Okay, question 1. I recently learned an asterisk when placed against an ex non-conforming use means it's less intense, least impact on amenity and livability in a residential zoning. A non-conforming office has an asterisk. Why would you change a lesser to a clearly defined, more intense impact to locality?
Mr. Petrovsky.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. The asterisk symbol in the zoning table of Local Planning Scheme 5 refers to the supplemental provisions and certain land uses that may be permissible in various zones of the city. It does not necessarily mean that the use is less intense or has less of an impact on amenity, and the intent of this asterisk when it was put in was to encourage the retention of heritage in the city. The site is not heritage listed or within a heritage area, so this provision actually doesn't apply in this instance. And we have assessed the application against Clause 23 of our local planning scheme. Both the existing and proposed land uses must be assessed on the individual merits.
Your second question, please, Ms. Park.
The council must ensure that the proposal is less detrimental, otherwise the approval of the proposal would be considered as an ultra vires act and therefore illegal and can be challenged in a Supreme Court. I don't believe that this DA is less impact to the existing immediate neighbour, me. How sure are you even that you're allowed to vote or council's allowed to vote?
Mr. Petrovsky.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. So ultra vires is a planning term, and it's when a decision maker doesn't have the power to make a decision or when it makes a decision which is beyond its power. And that's how it's generally considered in planning. In accordance with the city scheme, the proposal can be approved if council is of the opinion that the proposed use is less detrimental to the amenity of the area when compared to the existing use, and if the proposed use is closer to the intended purpose of the residential zone. It is open for council to determine the use is less detrimental, similar, or more detrimental, and a decision made in relation to the individual merits of the proposal is not considered to be ultra vires. Thank you.
The next question is from Matthew Park of Bagot Road, also in relation to C3. Mr. Park.
Given the evidence provided in the objecting submission by neighbouring properties regarding the historical manning levels and hours of use of the current office use, do you honestly believe a mental health facility accommodating 5 patients with a turnover of up to 450 patients per year, plus all the support and volunteers and staff going 24/7 hours a day, 365 days a year, can be less impact on the peaceful amenity of the neighbouring properties?
Okay, that question was read by Jess Park, and we'll have Director Development Services answering it, please.
Thank you, through you, Mayor, and thank you for your question. As provided in our report to Council, an analysis of the visitors to the office has been undertaken. The non-conforming office use currently operates without any conditions of planning approval, and the intensity of the use may vary. The conditions of planning approval recommended for the community purpose use control particular aspects of the proposal. For example, resident drop-off is limited to 900 to 1600 hours on weekdays, and staff shift changes between 600 and 2200 hours. These impacts are considered commensurate with activities reasonably expected in the residential zone, where generally people's movements aren't limited. Other measures in the management plan include no drug or alcohol use, quiet occupation of the property for the comfortable use of other participants and neighbours, nighttime is quiet time, and no visitors. These additional measures assist in ensuring that the proposed use does not impact the amenity of the residential zone and restrict its use greater than what could be reasonably expected from other permitted land uses in the residential zone. Thank you.
Okay, we've got a final question on item C3, and it's been submitted by Amy Fells of Bagot Road. Ms. Fells.
Thank you. My first question is, has the Subiaco Council sought legal advice with respect to the proposal, and if so, what was the nature of the advice?
Well, I don't need the Director to answer that because we have sought advice and we can't disclose the nature of it to you because it's legally, professionally privileged, and if we need to discuss it as a council this evening, we'll unfortunately have to go behind closed doors.
Thank you. Second question, what has changed between the time of the first application and submissions being made in October 22, when it was communicated to residents that the proposal would not likely be approved, to the proposal being recommended for approval at the meeting tonight?
Mr. Petrovski.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. So all planning applications are considered on their merits in accordance with the planning legislation as it applies, and a recommendation is not actually prepared until the assessment has been finalised, and that would also take into account community consultation. So in this instance, the recommendation for approval for the proposal has been provided to Council for consideration, and its appropriateness is for determination by Council. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that's all the questions, and for anyone interested, the answers will be made available online. So that brings us to public statements, beginning with a statement on item C1 from Stephanie Smith and Timothy Goyder of Salisbury Street.
Thank you, Mayor and councillors. Timothy is watching. He's currently over Easter working. We put in a public statement, which I'm sure you have considered, and we put in several submissions already, which you have read, so I don't propose to go through it at length. We're grateful to the proponents of our neighbours for amending the plans that we considered at this December meeting. However, unfortunately, we do not consider those amendments to satisfy our concerns adequately. As you know, our primary concern is the overshadowing to our backyard. I know that the city's planners have kindly put together some examples of overshadowing that has not been deemed to comply, but has complied with the design principles. I'd like to point out that those houses are all on the other side of Salisbury Street, and the shadow impact was actually confined to the structural areas of the houses, not to their backyards, and they were existing structures. Now that's not the case here. It's entirely our backyard, which is highly trafficked. We have a Kelpie, we have children that we play with out there. That's the only place we can hang out washing. We live in a very small inner city block, and so it's highly trafficked. It's a key reason we bought this property, was to use a beautiful garden, and that will be adversely affected by two things: the overshadowing and also the bulk of the building. So unfortunately, as we have a sunken garden, which is the case for all of the properties on our side of the street, it means that the discretion to exceed the building height adversely affects us, because the over 6 metre building bulk isn't 6 metres, it's actually more from our sunken garden. So every time we're in our garden, we will be staring up at the bulk of that building. And we think we're grateful to them for changing it slightly since December, but we do not consider it's gone far enough. We're also concerned by the excavations, which are occurring extremely close to our property, because our 100-year heritage old house was built before the art codes came into effect. So that's right up against the building. So unfortunately, we do consider that this proposal hasn't considered the locality adequately, and we have concerns which we do not consider have been addressed. And we would like to see the proponents compromise on the size of the proposed development, and we anticipate even if they reduced it by 1 bedroom, it would be sufficient and our concerns would fall away. Is that my time?
You can take 30 more seconds if you need.
I've been cut off. Thank you, Mayor. I think that all of the councillors do appreciate our concerns, and we're very grateful to you for considering them. But unfortunately, yes, we do consider that the design principles haven't been met here, and it shouldn't be approved in many of those respects that unfortunately the city's planners do consider it has been met. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. We've got a statement on item C2 from Julie Cass of Barker Road.
Thank you for the opportunity to address Council this evening, and thank you for the opportunity to submit our proposals, our problems with the proposal as this has gone through. We have issues with the boundary fence line becoming a parapet wall. So the boundary fence in its current existence, from a legal context, must be considered a screen wall because it was entirely paid for by my husband and myself. We constructed the wall. The solid part of that wall is entirely on our property. None of it goes into the neighbouring property, and we used a qualified, legally registered surveyor to ensure that was the case during the construction of this wall. So we had it string-lined in place, and then we had them come back and check and re-string-line before any of the construction of that wall. The current plans show this building will tie into that structure. That actually means there's negative setback being proposed for this parapet wall. We would request that, due to the bulk of the building, so they are seeking discretion to go a lot higher than allowed with their wall height, and because of the slope on this block, in front of the major opening that this parapet wall will go in front of, it will actually be between 3.7 and 3.9 metres high in front of the window. And then we have this extra story on the building, meaning that we have much less access to ventilation and much less access to solar, and it will completely change our ability to enjoy our property in its current form. The other part of this proposal that we find really quite upsetting with the parapet wall is that currently the fence line has been rendered and painted, and the planning team have said that they can use brick face work and not replace anything to the way it is currently being built. We went to a lot of expense. It's kind of like about a $70,000 structure to go that length of that property with everything that we did there. Another concern regarding the extension of this wall into the front garden, they want to replace the existing 0.7 metre high front fence with a 1.6 metre high brick fence. This will go up against mature trees. To actually build a 1.6 metre high fence, you need a significant footing to make sure that is a structurally sound fence. That will require digging up the roots of these mature trees, and it will require significant pruning of these trees. At the moment, we have perfect visual privacy in our front yard and we request that the council protect these mature trees for the sake of the streetscape, if not anything else. Our other concern is the visual privacy for the...
If I can just stop you there for a second. What the first beat means, and this is for everyone else's benefit as well, it means you've got 30 seconds left on your 3 minutes of allocated time. So if you wouldn't mind just wrapping up now, because your 3 minutes is up. At 3 minutes, the microphone cuts out.
Okay, so the north-facing deck does not have visual privacy cones drawn on the plans, and it will look entirely into our backyard. If you apply visual privacy, you only get 3.8 metres and you're meant to get 7.5. We request that the structure includes screening and it not be achieved by building on our property with screening on our property, which was suggested, or with strategic landscaping, because the actual ground height is 3.3 metres below the deck. So you'd need a tree to get to 5 metres high before it screened anything. So we request that physical screening be included in the building design to ensure it really does deliver that 7.5 metre cone of vision for visual privacy. Thank you.
Thank you. The next statement on C2 comes from David Beard of Barker Road, Subiaco.
Thank you for the opportunity to address the Council this evening regarding the proposed building on our western boundary. I urge the Council to reject the application as it is presented. I believe the application is misleading and does not accurately reflect the visual appearance of the proposed building from the street frontage. The illustrations provided in the application indicate that none of the third level of the building is visible from the street. However, when compared to the design drawings, a significant amount of the third level is visible. The design drawing also exaggerates the height of our property on the western boundary to minimise the height difference between the buildings. Again, this is inaccurate and deceptive. In addition, to describe this building as a two-storey and undercroft is misleading. The ground level slopes down to the north, so the middle floor is approximately 1.5 metres above the natural ground level at the rear of the building. The elevation drawings are also deceptive. The existing fence line on the drawing makes it look like the top of the fence is 2/3 up the height of the wall on our boundary. Having stood next to the fence, I can assure you it is nowhere near that height. It is closer to 1/3 up the wall. From a personal impact perspective, the 3-level section of the proposed house is adjacent to our rear yard. The wall adjacent to our yard is 6 metres, running almost the entire length of our yard area. I'm extremely concerned that this will create a heat trap, as it will significantly reduce the amount of breeze and airflow to our yard. Also, in relation to heat, the planning documents do not indicate the location of air conditioning units. If these are to be placed adjacent to our property, it will have the effect of increasing hot air being blown into our yard with little breeze to dissipate the heat. Although we're on the eastern side of the proposed building and therefore not considered to be impacted by overshadowing, my estimates are that by having an 8-metre structure adjacent to our western boundary will mean our rear yard and decking will be in shade from mid-afternoon in winter and by 4 p.m. in summer. The drawings indicate that there was no overlooking into our property. However, a 1.65 metre screen on the eastern end of the alfresco area is inadequate to protect the privacy of our yard and rear deck. Subiaco planners have indicated that there are other 2-storey properties in the area. I submit that most of those have the rooms built into the roof structure to minimise the visual impact and remain in keeping with traditional houses in the precinct. The design of this house is nothing like other properties in the area, and the scale and bulk of the proposed building will make this house stand out from all others. For all the reasons I've listed, I ask that the Council reject this application in its current form. Thank you.
Thank you. We've got some statements from item C3 now. The first statement comes from Paul Greco of Bagot Road.
Hello again. So I'm the owner and resident of 46 Bagot Road, 2 doors down from 60. I'm an engineer by profession, married and father to a wonderful 1-year-old daughter. Our family was delighted to have the opportunity to purchase and move into this neighbourhood about 6 months ago and plan to be here for the long haul. Why did we choose Subiaco? Above all, we wanted a safe, established, trustworthy and friendly neighbourhood for our daughter to grow up in, and we wanted confidence that this would be the environment around her for many years ahead. As you can imagine, we were quite shocked to hear, before we barely unpacked, that an application such as this, proposed for 2 doors down the road, actually had planning support. I'm no expert on town planning, but I am detail-oriented and very logical. And to me, this application is just a joke. There's no logic to it. It cherry-picks little pieces of policy where it suits and ignores the rest, and that's obvious to a novice like me. What I can't comprehend is why the City of Subiaco is so keen to ignore its own rules, schemes and guidelines to support it, so I ask, what's in it for you? This is an application for a community purpose facility in a residential zone, and according to your local planning scheme, that is not allowed. No ifs, buts or maybes, just no. The reality is it's not a community purpose facility or a short stay dwelling. It's actually a hospital to provide clinical treatment for mental health patients, which is also a no in your own scheme. Suggesting this is somehow less detrimental or closer to the intended purpose of the property than an office is a ridiculous argument. More to the point, you don't actually have the authority for discretionary approval here. You'll hear more technical submissions provided by experts in the community, so you don't need that detail from me, but for me this is about trust. As I'm sure you know, trust in government institutions in Australia is extremely low and continuing to fall. You might wonder why, you might blame the people at the top, but in reality it's decisions like this that affect the daily lives of everyday people that make or break trust. So if you approve this application, you will lose the trust of a room full of your constituents. We moved here with trust in an established council that acts with integrity, that is, you do what you say you will do, and are true to your own rules, principles and values. So we trust you will do the right thing here. The program's going to be fine. They'll find somewhere else more appropriate to set up and operate. They have funding and they don't need to rely on a Samaritan's property. If they need the cash, they can always sell, and I can tell you from experience, prices are high. Thanks.
The next statement is from Amy Fells of Bagot Road.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you all for the opportunity this evening. You just heard from my husband. Together we live at 46 Bagot Road with our 18-month-old daughter. On a high level, I support the notion of having a facility based on the Maytree model in Western Australia. But we're not here to talk about the merits of the model. What Council is asked to determine is plainly and simply whether a site in a residential area currently used from 9 till 4 as an office can and should be the premises of such a facility. The development class and use for the proposed facility is being tactfully described as civic and cultural community purpose under LPS 5. Simply, the application is flawed from the outset. You don't have to be a lawyer or a planner to conclude that this is not an appropriate or accurate description. The ordinary and natural meaning of the words are plain and clear. It's obvious on the face of the contents of LPS 5 and the legislative instruments to which it refers that what we're talking about here is a hospital. Hospital means premises which are a hospital within the meaning given in the Health Services Act, section 8.4, which says, each of the following is a hospital, premises where medical, surgical or dental treatment or nursing care is provided for ill or injured persons and at which overnight accommodation may be provided. And in subsection 5, it says an ill person includes a person who has a mental illness. The patrons of this facility are attending because they are mentally unwell. They have suicidal ideations or have made attempts. They come to the centre to receive treatment to overcome these matters, including counselling and such other care as may be required in their circumstances. Their care is overseen throughout their stay. This is all in their management plan. If it's not a hospital, the only thing it could reasonably be is a medical centre used by 3 or more health practitioners at the same time per LPS 5, or medical consulting rooms used by 2 or more health practitioners. for the investigation or treatment of human injuries or ailments and for general outpatient care. In accordance with the management plan, there are numerous health practitioners, such as counsellors, at the facility at once. It's for treatment of an ailment, being suicidal ideations. None of these are permissible per LPS 5. They're all marked with an X in residential areas in the zoning table. Call it what it is. So what is a community purpose? LPS 5 says it means premises designed or adapted primarily for the provision of educational, social or recreational facilities or services by organisations involved in activities for community benefit. Blind Freddy wouldn't say that this facility fits the bill. The use and heading civic and cultural is a further clue intended meaning of these development classes. There's nothing civic or cultural about this. Community is not defined in LPS 5. Oxford Dictionary defines community as a body of people who live in the same place, usually sharing a common cultural or ethnic identity. How can it be said that the services offered by the proposed facility are for the benefit of our community, being the community of Subiaco? With reference to the management plan, the criteria for intake is narrow. It's the only centre of its kind in WA. It's not accessible to the public or community at all, other than a select group of screened individuals at the discretion of management. This is the City of Subiaco. Your community is the people in this room, ratepayers, your electors. The community you're elected to serve is our community. Our community is telling you that we do not accept this facility being commenced next to our homes in our residential street. And LPS 5 tells you plainly and simply, you don't have the power to approve this application. Thank you.
Matthew Park of Bagot Road, and it's a statement that's going to be read by Michael Lyons, as I understand it.
Maybe not. Okay, so the proposed mental health facility will have a significant impact on the livability of surrounding properties. It will be significantly detrimental to my days, evenings, nights and weekends. It is beyond me that the councillors or town planners can possibly accept that the proposed facility will be less detrimental to the surrounding neighbourhood than what the property has been utilised for the past. In what way can any of you come to the conclusion that a mental health facility housing 5 suicidal youth at any given time, plus staff and volunteers, shift changing at all hours, operating 24 hours, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, between 450 new patients rotating through, will not be a significantly more intense impact on the surrounding properties than the existing, rarely used facility. The applicants claim pick up and drop off times between 8 and 4. However, the applicants cannot stop the distressed patients leaving and returning to the property as they leave, including all hours of the night. The applicant claims volunteers will work continuous shifts between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. This is going to be very hard relying on volunteers. Being an immediate neighbour to the property since 2009, I can state and back up with evidence that the facility has not been manned and attended as the applicants claim, even pre-COVID. The property was only ever very lightly staffed, and over the years there have been break-ins, property unattended. Distressed person trying to enter the property, property unattended. The CEO would call in on Sundays to put out the rubbish bin and return on Mondays to bring them back in. The property was unattended. Multiple visits by my husband to discuss the fencing issues, etc. Property unattended.
Pippa Park of Bagot Road.
My name is Pippa Park and I'm a 15-year-old girl in year 10. This year I will have exams. My bedroom window is directly outside the front door of the Samaritans and right near the car spaces. If people are coming in 24 hours, 7 days a week, this facility is going to impact me greatly and it will be a lot different to what it is now. No one is ever there on the weekends and there are very few people during the day. The cause and the service is such a good idea, and I do care about the young people who are feeling distressed and suicidal. I believe that the people should get the help that is needed, and I hope they can find a suitable but caring environment that will not negatively impact their surrounding locality. The constant noises all night long of car doors shutting, car radios or phone calls, engines starting, people talking, is going to scare me as I'm a light sleeper. All those different new sounds every night and all night is going to affect me greatly. If you had kids, would you really want them to feel unsafe in their own bedroom, in their own home at night? Isn't this meant to be a safe place? If I have friends sleeping over, I want them to feel safe and comfortable with these new noises. And with these new noises and lots of new people every 5 days next door, I just don't know how I'm meant to achieve that. There's no one ever there on weekends and rarely during the day while I'm at home. I forget it is ever really there. The constant change of staff members, volunteers and patients all throughout the night, every day, during the day and on my weekends is going to affect me and give me anxiety. It's not like a regular neighbour who would actually get to know. It is different. People coming and only staying for 5 days. This is nothing like any of my other neighbours. People who rent stay longer than 5 days. I've heard my mum and dad talking about this getting approved, only if it was less impact to a residential zone into a mental health facility. I may only be in year 10, but it sounds like to me that this is a lot more impact than it ever has been. As I look at all of you, I presume that there are mothers, fathers, husbands and wives, grandparents, brothers and sisters, and aunts and uncles. Would you really want your grandkids, kids, nieces and nephews feeling so unsafe with the constant changes next door to their safe space, their bedroom and their home? You have the power to reject this development application, and if you approve this, you are lying to yourself if you don't realise that you have made me feel unsafe in my own community, in my own home, and in my own bedroom.
Jess Parker, Baggot Road.
All right, first of all, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians and owners of the land and to pay my respect to their elders past and present. As you might have guessed already, I'm Jess Park, and if you hadn't already gathered, I share an immediate 40-metre boundary at 58 Baggot Road with this DA. Tonight is not to debate or determine the merits of suicide intervention or the program. Tonight determines if the council is able to consider a change of use from one non-conforming use to another. Clause 23.3 of the city's planning scheme in a residential zone. For council, they must ensure that the change is A, less detrimental to the amenity of the locality than the existing non-conforming use. Well, I am the locality. It is my amenity, my neighbours, my family and friends. A mental health facility with a cycle of staff every 24 hours, 300 to 450 patients per year, cycling every 5 days, 7-day-a-week activity, all through my night. There is no dispute that this use is intensification to my existing amenity and locality. It is more intense than an admin office and call centre. B, is closer to the intended purpose of the zone in which the land is situated, residential. These patients are transient. Staff and volunteers are transient. Short-term accommodation does...
Ms Park, this seems to be a different statement to what you submitted. What are you reading from? You chose to do another one, did you? Yeah, well, look, how much more do you have to go? Because we've got a pretty established practice that we take submissions up to 5 p.m. and after that, it's closed. Okay, that's great. Keep going then.
So going back to B, it is closer to the intended purpose of the zone in which the land is situated, residential. These patients are transient, staff and volunteers are transient. Short-term accommodation does not render it closer to residential. A cycle of 450 new patients, 10 different staff and volunteers every 24 hours does not mimic a home. There is no dispute that this use is less like a residential home. You are judging my amenity, my locality, not yours, mine. I can guarantee you this will detrimentally affect my amenity and my locality immediately next door. This will detrimentally affect my days, nights, sleep and weekends as I now exist. I ask of you, is it even legal?
If you wouldn't mind emailing us a copy of that statement, that'd be much appreciated. Roy Malavi of Bedford Avenue, a statement on C3.
Thank you very much. Mine is a short one, but I feel the same as other speakers so far. Council approval is based upon merit of the applicants and has downplayed the impact on neighbouring properties' peaceful amenities. A management plan cannot ensure that a quiet environment is maintained and that control measures will be successful. Subiaco Council approval is based upon 4 documents: a management plan, handover procedure, risk and critical incidents. Yet to date, only the management plan exists. 3 out of 4 documents do not exist, and I do not support this DA. Thank you.
Thank you. Christopher and Louisa Clayton of Bedford Avenue.
Hello, Council. I'm afraid I don't have a copy of my statement, but it was a very short one. And basically, we just wanted to say that we object the development proposal for 60 Bagot Road, and we're in support of all the other submissions that you've already heard and the statements you've heard. Thank you very much.
Michael Lyons of Bedford Avenue. We've got a copy. Yeah. Kirsten Panton of Hay Street, a statement on C3.
Okay, my name is Kirsten Panton. I'm the Youth Sanctuary Development Lead. I'm here to talk about the operations of the Youth Sanctuary. Through our phone intake service, we will be determining whether an individual is suitable for our service. Our priority of these calls will be to ascertain the young person's relative suicide risk and ensure they are able to keep themselves safe for the duration of the stay at the Youth Sanctuary. All staff will be trained in standardised risk assessments. Individuals deemed to be at severe risk of harm will not be suitable for our service and will be encouraged to access alternative services. We recognise the importance of maintaining a very clear criteria of entry to ensure the right people are entering our service, but to also ensure the young people are receiving the right service for them. Individuals will be excluded from our service if they are outside that 16 to 24 age range, using drugs or alcohol use as a coping mechanism, currently streak homeless, experiencing psychotic episodes or severe acute mental health issues, not able to sufficiently engage in our befriending process, characterised to have no suicide risk or very high suicide risk, or expressing specific needs that the sanctuary can't meet. Importantly, the sanctuary is a non-medical service. We will not be employing nurses or doctors, and we will not be providing any medical services or administering any medications. young people requiring these services will not be suitable for us for the youth sanctuary. Once young people satisfy the eligibility criteria, they will be provided with our address, but not before. During the assessment process, the code of conduct, the house rules will be discussed with the young people. The house is intended to function as any normal household would, though these house rules will be clearly communicated and agreed to prior to the young person entering the service. If a young person is no longer meeting our inclusion criteria or no longer able to meet the house rules or any severe breach, they will be exited from our service. The sanctuary will be a place for young people to build hope and resilience. Young people engage in structured and unstructured therapeutic activities, which will be quiet in nature, as we are intending this to be a calm and tranquil environment for young people. This will include one-to-one therapy and group activities. Skill groups will also be run to teach young people distress tolerance, emotion regulation, mindfulness and relaxation activities. There will also be quiet time in the evenings, and young people can choose how to spend their time indoors. If activities produce excessive noise, we will look for ways to mitigate disruptions both to our own residents and our neighbours, or replace the activity to a quieter one. Walks at night will not be permitted due to staff and client safety and protecting our amenity of our neighbours. The sanctuary will be staffed up to 5 people at any one time, which will include a team lead, support coordinator, peer support leader, and a volunteer manager, including a Samaritans trained volunteer. Shift changes will occur from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. each evening, minimising potential disruption to our neighbours. We are aware that an individual's suicide risk may change across a young person's stay, and as such, the risk will be assessment will be ongoing. The young person will receive one-to-one opportunities to reassess risk. If we have any concerns, emergency services will be engaged. Almost done. Risk mitigation is really important to our staff and our board. We take it really seriously, and our risk register covers all known risks to a service of this kind. The Youth Sanctuary fills a really great service need in the suicide prevention and intervention space, and a service that the Subiaco community should hopefully be proud to support. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Rachel Langdon of Bagot Road, a statement on C3. Okay. A statement from Daniela Merger on C3.
Urbanista Town Planning was engaged last year by the landowners of number 58 Bagot Road to represent their interest in the proposed development application at number 60 Bagot Road. The application seeks to change the use of an existing non-conforming use to an office to a community purpose land use, which is an X, not permitted land use in accordance with the city scheme. As stated on page 32 of the council meeting agenda, Local Planning Scheme number 5 provides the ability through clause 23.3 to consider a change of use application for a non-conforming use to a non-permitted use where the proposal is considered to be less detrimental to the amenity of the locality and is closer to the intended purpose of the zone. The proposal must fully satisfy the clause in order for the application to be approved. If it is determined not to satisfy the clause, the application must be refused. There is no discretion available should it be determined not to satisfy this clause. This is a direct quote from the agenda. The officer's report states that the proposal is considered to be less detrimental than the existing office land use for essentially 3 main reasons. These are: 1, the land use is controlled by a management plan; 2, there are no external changes to the building, which would make the building's appearance look less like a dwelling; and 3, people will be residing at the premises, albeit for a very short period of time, which is more aligned with the purpose of a dwelling. We have heard from several speakers this evening that the land use, who've clearly stated that this proposal is more aligned with a hospital or other land use. However, I'm here this evening to demonstrate to Council that whichever way you look at this proposal and whichever land use you categorise it as, this proposal is not less detrimental to the amenity of the locality. This is not a question of whether this application should or should not be approved. It is a question of whether the proposal can be approved. And we say no. The proposal cannot be approved as it is 100% more detrimental to my client's amenity and the residential amenity of the locality. With respect to the proposed management plan, we understand that this is in place to control the land use and to reduce any potential impacts on amenity. However, no one can truly guarantee that the management plan will be adhered to at all times. So surely by creating the element of risk demonstrates in itself that this proposal is more detrimental than an office that is used by 7 staff members. Further, I refer to condition 2 of the officer's recommendation, which requires an amended management plan to include the preparation of a code of conduct, a critical response plan, and further and more information on the handover procedure. Should this not be submitted prior to council making any decision? If the council are able to make a decision based on the management plan and potentially amend the management plan as part of any proposed conditions, the same should be said for these documents. Look, more broadly, we support the ideas behind this facility. However, it is important that decisions are made based on orderly and proper planning, and that all emotion is removed from the decision-making process, especially when this decision is based on law and not a merit-based assessment. There is no doubt that this proposal is more detrimental to the amenity and livability of the surrounding properties, as highlighted above or discussed previously. Therefore, we submit that legally this application is unable to be approved and must be refused this evening. Thank you.
Ashley Lynn of Perth Children's Hospital.
Thank you. My name is Ashley Lynn. I'm a Professor of Youth Mental Health at the Telethon Kids Institute. I understand that the community is worried about the change of use, but I'm here to provide some facts for you all today. So suicide is the leading cause of death of young people in Western Australia, and in Western Australia we have higher rates of suicide than the national average. We've talked a little bit about looking at facts and not emotions. So what I do want to highlight is that suicide doesn't discriminate. So people have raised the idea that you are parents and aunties and uncles and grandparents. Well, everyone has been touched by suicide, and the people who will be attending the sanctuary could be your children, your neighbours or your family. We're not talking about people who are necessarily homeless or using drugs, as a lot of these will be exclusion criteria. In fact, a report from the Ombudsman about preventing suicide in young people showed that of the people who died by suicide in 2009 to 2018, 57% lived in major cities and 35% of them were from the least disadvantaged areas. That's people living in places like Subiaco. And our research at Telethon Kids Institute has shown that having places that support the mental health of young people protects the community against things like suicide clusters, which are multiple suicides in one place. So there is a greater benefit to the community. I will also say, just in closing, that peer-led suicide prevention is part of national and state mental health and suicide prevention plans. This is not a medical facility. This is a peer-led facility, a peer-led house or residential facility. There will be no doctors and there will be no nurses. People who are unable to manage their medication or who require a medical service will not be eligible for the service. Thank you.
Thank you. Zrinka Highfield of Bagot Road.
Suicide is a leading cause of death for young people in Western Australia. Imagine a Western Australia in which suicide is not a leading cause of death for young people, in which local communities do everything that is possible to prevent suicide. For over 50 years, Samaritans has been providing emotional support to those in our community who felt they didn't have anyone else to talk to. Through countless encounters, we have heard time and time again that the experience of suicidal thoughts is still as stigmatizing today as it has been when Samaritans first opened its doors in 1967. People experiencing thoughts of suicide often report feeling stigmatized, unseen, unheard, and deeply misunderstood. This can all lead to a profound sense of isolation and hopelessness, a feeling of completely alone and without hope. And when someone is experiencing a profound sense of isolation, that they have no one to turn to, when they feel disconnected, even if they're connected, surrounded by people, that can lead to thinking that there is no way out and that the suicide is the only option. The fear and misunderstanding that still persists, not only in the community but also within the services that are available, is making the experience of having thoughts of suicide even more unbearable. By listening to people touched by suicide and moved by a gap of existing services in the UK, 2 Samaritans volunteers started Maytree, a suicide sanctuary which pioneered a new approach to community suicide prevention. Maytree took the befriending method as practiced by Samaritans and positioned it at the center of their approach. Its uniqueness comes from a focus on creating respectful, compassionate, and supportive environment. Befriending approach recognizes that everyone's experience of suicidal thoughts and feelings is unique, and that providing a safe and non-judgmental environment can be a critical first step in helping individuals find their way forward. For the past 20 years, Maytree has been offering suicide prevention by offering emotional support, a safe space to stay, to move those experiencing thoughts of suicide from a place of hopelessness to a place of hope, and that the future is possible and that the life is worth living. Our youth suicide sanctuary is modelled on Maytree, but it also recognises the uniqueness of our local context, the histories and stories that are individuals and special to this place, our place. Youth Sanctuary is honouring the human experience of those that are living with thoughts of suicide, as well as those that were affected by suicide. Its mission, by providing a compassionate and caring presence to those in need, is to help them feel less isolated and alone, help them gain greater clarity and insights into their experiences of suicide. Suicide prevention is everyone's business, and it doesn't sit well with me, and it shouldn't with you, knowing that the suicide is the leading cause of death for young people in Western Australia. Youth Suicide Sanctuary is community's response to let young people of our state know that they are not alone. Youth Sanctuary is our community solution that is also offering a hope that someday, in a not so distant future, our WA community is going to be free from youth suicide. And I'm inviting Subiaco community to join us in being part of building a suicide-safer communities. Thank you.
The last statement on C3 comes from Peter Simpson of Bagot Road. Mr. Simpson, your statement goes just a touch over a page and a half, so just keep an eye on the clock, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, Peter Simpson from PTS Town Planning. I'm located at 326 Rockaby Road. This facility is obviously a very important community facility. We support the recommendation to approve this application before you tonight. As Mr. Mayor's advised, I provided my comments, so I'm not going to go through it in detail, but I want to address some key points. The existing site is a non-conforming use and has been from 1975. There are no restrictions on that non-conforming office use. The proposed sanctuary is a support facility. It's not acute care. It's not designed as a mental health accommodation or to offer home to people with mental illness. The purpose is to offer brief, time-limited residential support to young people experiencing suicidal thoughts. As we've heard, the proposed use is not a medical facility. It does not prescribe medication, doesn't have doctors and nurses. The proposed use is subject to an extensive management plan, and with the additional conditions, which we support, will ensure any risks are mitigated. As has been raised previously, there are 2 considerations for the council to take into account tonight. I'm not going to go through them in detail because obviously the agenda has gone through a significant evaluation of the amenity. But what I will say is the use is proposed to operate as a normal residential dwellings in terms of the activities undertaken on site. And as I said before, it will be highly controlled through the management plan. The City of Subiaco has the ability tonight to support this facility, to identify this serious issue that needs to be addressed, while also ensuring through the management plan and conditions that the use will not impact the amenity. I just want to address two last points. The agenda refers to the use as community purpose brackets mental health accommodation. And while we understand that mental health accommodation is a descriptive term, it does not accurately reflect the intended use. We consider it's probably better described as a youth suicide prevention accommodation or similar. Lastly, we were at the meeting last week and it was raised through the agenda briefing that there may be consideration of a time-limited approval. We are open to a time-limited approval depending on the timeframe proposed. We have a number of funding partners who have expectations in terms of the minimum timeframe for the operation of the facility and therefore would need to meet these timeframes. We also, as an important outcome, is to measure the results of the sanctuary, which can only be done over a certain period of time. Consequently, if tonight a time-limited approval is, we would request and be comfortable with a 4-year approval. Thank you.
Thank you. That completes the statements on C3. So we now move on to statements on C10, beginning with Kwok Ming Ho of Evans Street. Okay, we'll move on to Leonie Forrest of Morgan Street.
My name is Leonie Forrest. I'm the owner-occupier of 26 Morgan Street, which is the property on the southeast corner of the affected area. I maintain my objection to the request by the owners of 37 Wayland Road to amend local planning scheme number 5. They made their request without notice to or consultation with me. The owners of 37 Wayland Road appear only concerned about financial repercussions to themselves due to previous decisions of council, in particular LPS 5. Their request, if granted, will have devastating consequences for all of the owners in the affected area. I refer to issues related to increased development such as parking, sewerage, streetscape, increased traffic, noise pollution, loss of character and likely loss of vegetation due to infill, together with a reduction in sunlight access due to the high-density landfill. I thank the council members for opposing the request, both initially and again in response to the recent request from the Minister. Thank you.
Thank you. Ko Tamura of Evans Street. Nadia Key of Morgan Street. Chris Martin of Morgan Street.
I'm Christine Martin of 34 Morgan Street. I bought my Morgan Street home 5 years ago in a medium to low density neighbourhood with great amenities, schools, parks, public transport, train network, and these proposed changes directly affect my home and my family. I oppose the Section 76 order request, and I can see no reason to amend the local planning scheme. Subiaco's town planning has created character-filled neighbourhoods, and Shenton Park is a great place to live and raise a family. Thank you.
Matthew Key of Centro Avenue, Subiaco. Aya Sunderland of Morgan Street. Bowen Llewellyn of Morgan Street. Okay, well, for the benefit of the recording, we've just had it explained to us that a lot of the people who submitted statements didn't understand that they'd have an opportunity to read them. What I'd say in response to that is that copies of the statements have been circulated to councillors and I'm sure will be taken into account just like all the meeting materials. I think that brings us to Peter Chow of Morgan Street.
Good evening, Mayor and councillors and staff. I'm representing Peter Chow. My name is Glenda Kay. I'm also from Morgan Street, number 16. Peter and his wife are from number 24. My wife and I are residents and property owners of 24 Morgan Street, Shenton Park. We would like to add our support to the many neighbourhood residents in the affected area to object to the current application to change zoning density of Morgan, Fortune and Wayland Street properties. It is our understanding that Subiaco Council had previously voted against a similar application, following strong objections from many residents and property owners in the area, based on a number of valid and good reasons. The rezoning basis has not changed substantially since that last council decision. There is therefore no valid basis to now consider another similar application or other future similar applications to rezone the said areas. This rezoning change application, as with previous similar application, are put forward by opportunistic owners who are planning to move out of the area to live elsewhere. They are backed by opportunistic property developers. These people are either moving out or do not live in our area and will therefore not be impacted by the potential serious issues the proposed high-density developments will bring to the neighbourhood. We, the residents who live in and love the area, will be the ones directly impacted, and our views should preponderate and should be heard. I surmise these opportunistic sellers and developers are also not inclined to live in the shadows of some 5 to 6 story apartments. It is hypocritical of them to impose such incumbents on others. Regards, Peter and Leanne Chow.
The next statement is from Michael Mitchell, and I understand it will be read by Peter McDonald. Oh, good.
Mr. Mayor, I wonder whether I had also, as Glenda Kay had submitted an emailed letter to the council. Would it be opportune to read that also?
Sorry, who emailed a letter to council? Oh, you did. Look, we'll hear from you a bit later. I think we'll stick to the order that I've got in front of me. So, Michael Mitchell, please.
Thank you very much. We live just outside of the area at 17 Wayland Road that's affected. Dear Mayor, councillors and staff, we wish to add our support to the City of Subiaco's decision in May 2022 not to approve the proposed amendment number 2 to the City's local planning scheme and now recommend that further consideration of this amendment should also be rejected. The zoning of our precinct in Shenton Park was widely discussed and debated within the local and the wider communities prior to the City's local planning scheme and strategy confirmation in February 2020. We do not consider that there has been any change in local community sentiments. Whilst empathetic to the concerns of the proposer, we believe that the proposed amendment would transfer their same issues to the wider Shenton Park community between Railway Road and Lake Julba. Approval of this proposed amendment could and would probably lead to similar zoning amendments of large areas by individuals looking for high-density development opportunities. We believe that the current heritage value and lifestyle provided by single homes per lot in our area would be lost, adding to the anxiety of many property owners of when they'll be confronted with high-density developments adjacent to their homes. Thank you for your consideration.
Alice Tippett of Rosalie Street. Read by Peter McDonald.
Good evening, Mayor and Councillors. I'm reading this statement on behalf of Alice Tippett, who has prepared it for the Subiaco Tree Canopy Advocates. This is Alice speaking. I do not support the proposed amendment number 2 to LPS 5. I fear that a change to the zoning to make the blocks similar will just result in more demolitions and tree canopy and green space loss. If Amendment 2 is passed, then this will set a precedent for other areas alongside R100 zones to try and get their zoning changed as well. Thank you.
James Westcott of Wayland Road. Glenda Kay of Morgan Street.
Thank you, Mayor and Councillors. Thank you for your attention to my concerns with this proposal. I do not agree with the private scheme amendment proposed by owners of 37 Wayland Road, Shenton Park, to rezone their property from R15 to R60, nor their proposed rezoning of neighbouring properties as detailed in the information lodged. As said in my letter in May 2022 on this subject, this application is a result of poorly considered LPS 5 approved by Minister Safiotti, allowing R100 zoning in an established heritage area and where there was no transition between high and low density residential areas. Not satisfied with the city's decision to reject their application, the owners are intent on a selfish approach direct to the Minister to overturn that decision and to secure an upzoning of their property. To add weight to their own pursuits, they're proposing the whole block, Wayland, Fortune, Morgan, should also be rezoned. Several newspaper articles state the owners of 37 Wayland Road are traumatised by the potential devaluing of their property due to R100 zoning next door, from which I conclude it is all about dollars and prospective property developers hovering around. I concur with the city's decision to reject the said application. There is an active LPS 5 scheme and the city's local planning strategy in place, which should be their legislation in force until expiry. Ad hoc requests for a private amendment during the term of the legislative documents simply consume city planners' time and expenditure. Wayland Road owners will have their opportunity for change when the LPS 5 is due for review. Piecemeal private scheme amendments are disruptive to the community of surrounding homeowners. In Morgan Street, one owner is confidently embarking on renovations to their property, knowing LPS 5 remains active for some time yet. These owners should not be subjected to the uncertainty of potential rezoning while in the process of expensive renovations. Approval of the Wayland Road application for rezoning would only open the floodgates to more and more upzone applications from owners keen to capitalise on the popularity of the area and falling under the spell of the property developers' dollars. High density climate conditions. On Saturday, the 18th of February, the ABC reported WA Planning Commission Chairman David Caddy agreed Perth's planning policy was not currently mitigating the urban heat island effect well enough. High density areas are considered to have a detrimental effect owing to the frequent removal of tree canopy, causing soaring temperatures. In the same ABC article, it was also reported that data has shown of all the capital cities, Perth has the least tree canopy, with less than 20% of its area covered. Subiaco Council has a responsibility to ensure that our areas under its jurisdiction do not suffer these extreme conditions by avoidable by common sense planning and rejection of excessive high density money-making schemes and applications. Thank you.
Patrick Beale from Morgan Street, a statement which is going to be read by Joe McPhee.
Okay, this is from Patrick and Anne Beale. They live at 8 Morgan Street. We wholeheartedly support the Council's response to the application and the current response to the Minister for further information. At risk here is the validity and integrity of the LPS 5 strategy and plan. If this amendment were to be adopted, the transition from high/medium density to medium-low density elsewhere in the city would be put into question, and if the amendment were to be successful, then the precedent is set for other sites to follow. Given the self-interest of homeowners in these areas who see an opportunity to make a windfall profit on their properties through rezoning, the city would expect a slew of applications from individuals or small groups to have their zoning changed. This is not how a proper planning process works, and it is not how cities are designed and made in the 21st century. The proper response to the application for Amendment Number 2 is not to support it. By doing this in the current provisions of the LPS 5, we will have a chance to mature and bed down in the community. Property values for all in these areas will rise due to the geographic location and the inherent values in the mature communities it services. Thank you, from Patrick Beale.
The next statement is from Sarah Hops of Morgan Street.
Thank you, Mayor and Councillors. I wish to have it on public record that we, the owners of 36 Morgan Street, support the City of Subiaco's officer recommendation that this proposed amendment is inconsistent with the City's local planning framework and should not be adopted. We are in exactly the same position as the owners of 37 Wayland Road. We live directly behind their house, and we too are at the interface of R15 and R100 zoned land. Like many residents, working through LPS 5 was an emotionally exhausting time, and here I am back again talking about it. We didn't get the outcome we'd hoped for, and as a result, we have the risk of a 4 to 6 story apartment block next door to us in our 1920s character home. Subsequent to this decision, I took part in a community working group to draft a new local planning framework to ensure adequate protections were put into place for houses at the interface. A number of residents, including development professionals, worked hard with council staff to develop policies that would make it possible to live at the interface of low and high density with as little impact as possible. We feel confident the framework will protect us for what happens in the future so we can continue living in the home we love with our 3 children. If our block was to be rezoned R60, we would lose those protections that I and the community working group spent hours working on with the City of Subiaco staff. I wrote to the Minister for Planning 2 years ago asking her to reconsider her decision over LPS 5. Do you know what she said in reply to me? She said that the local planning framework was there to protect our property and would make adequate provisions. It feels unjust that the work done by so many in the local community should be disregarded because of the request from just one landowner, where the motivation appears to be financial, in that the request to upzone is designed to make land more valuable by making it more desirable for developers. The difference is we want to stay living in our home with our family for a long time into the future. We don't want to sell to a developer and move away. We never asked to have our home rezoned, neither did any of the other residents on Morgan Street and Wayland Road between Railway and Fortune. We don't want to lose the protections that the local planning framework ensures, and we think the council should continue to make decisions in the interests of those who want to live in the City of Subiaco and Shenton Park. Thank you.
Helen Leader from Cuthbert Street.
Sorry, I've been sitting too long. I can't have been the only person who argued against the state's intention to upzone parts of Railway Road to R100. This was done in full knowledge of there being no transition zone down to the backing R15 and R20 properties. This meant an immediate loss of value to the adjacent properties, leaving those affected residents with few good options. The inevitable, if not the state's actual intention, has now happened to this close-knit community. Residents who at the stroke of the minister's pen lost a large percentage of the value of their property, as well as their amenity, want compensation to allow them to relocate. This compensation comes at the expense of the amenity of their neighbours and friends. The only winners will be developers, and perhaps the minister, who had originally wanted far more extensive rezoning. Should she agree to the requested scheme amendment, it will surely be a precedent leading to further destruction of communities. And what else is there to say?
Peter MacDonald of Onslow Road.
Good evening again. I object to the proposed scheme amendment number 2. Firstly, the proposed scheme amendment seeks to solve a density interface issue by increasing the density of an existing low-density character residential precinct rather than via use of existing local planning policies, or by seeking in any way to improve the protections afforded by the local planning policies. The applicant's proposed solution would impose unwelcome increased density on various of their neighbours who do not wish their homes and abutting properties to be upcoded. Secondly, the whole rationale for pushing increased density into the low-density areas east of Shenton Park Station, over and above what is already provided via LPS 5, is suspect. Planning Minister Safiotti has previously referred to the historically low passenger numbers alighting at Shenton Park Station and has used that as a rationale for increased density in and around the station precinct. The same argument was made with regard to Daglish Station, by the way. But with Monterio Quarter soon to add in the vicinity of more than 2,000 residents and 1,100 dwellings within 400 metres of the station, and with Shenton College now approaching 3,000 staff and students and on the doorstep of the station, there is more than ample density within the immediate station precinct to meet the Minister's objectives. By comparison, as at the last local government elections in 2019 in the city of Subiaco, in the whole of South Ward, as it was then, I believe there were only about 1,500 electors. So you can see that there is an enormous increase programmed in the traffic across Shenton Station, and the rationale, therefore, is flawed. Thank you.
Josephine McPhee of Morgan Street.
I object to the proposed scheme amendment number 2. We as a community over recent years have been through a stressful time obtaining a planning outcome for the city via LPS 5. Are we really going to have to go through this whole process again via a series of unwanted scheme amendments of this sort, increasing our density?
Thank you. Ms McPhee, I understand you're going to read 2 more statements for a couple of your neighbours. The first one is from John Hinton of Bannier Lane.
This is from John. Yep, you know all that. I am an active elector and resident of the city of Subiaco. I strongly oppose the proposal to increase the zoning density referred to above. I previously stated my reasons at the council meeting, and they included the destruction of the environment of the city by large overbearing heat radiant buildings, the destruction of native vegetation, flora and fauna in the area, the physical intrusion of the structures and their inhabitants into the lives, privacy and safety of the immediate neighbours, the mental stress induced into a significant number of residents, not just those situated immediately next door, but within the sight, sound and physical presence of numerous and other uncaring neighbours. Number 5, the overloading of the already stretched facilities that the city must provide: roads, drainage, schools, water, electricity, etc. The addition of traffic to already crowded roads that support on-road parking 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, at a consequence of Shenton Park being a suburb developed when the family car was an unusual possession. The degradation of the devaluation of the value of surrounding houses in the period, probably to be of long duration, rising interest rates, soaring inflation, and uncertain world. The obstruction of large shadows into the lives and homes of many. Subiaco is already at the forefront of council supporting multi-storey dwellings, and it is sorely short of recreational open space, a commodity already taken by the hurried instruction of Bob Hawke School and proposed 30-storey flats. In summary, it is opposed because it can open the way to reckless approval of structures that are then reapproved to give greater density, e.g. the market site in the town centre. My thanks for your kind attention.
Thank you. And the final statement was submitted by Cherry Martin. Thank you.
This is from Dr. Cherry Martin. She lives at 25 Morgan Street. I spoke to the council last meeting when considering the rezoning proposal for the entire block, in brackets Wayland, Fortune, Morgan Streets. Not one resident at that meeting spoke in favour of it. The council voted against it. There is now apparently a claim being made that it was not appropriately advertised. Given that it did not have the community support or the support of council, advertising would have been a waste of ratepayers' money. I remain opposed to the rezoning. It would be extremely disappointing if political ideology meant that the negative impact on people's lives was imposed upon the residents of this area.
Thank you. That brings us to the end of public statements, and there were no petitions or approved deputations this evening. So I will now ask Council to confirm minutes of the previous meeting, being the ordinary Council meeting of the 13th of December 2022. I've got a mover in Councillor White and a seconder in Councillor Stroud. All those in favour? Looks like it's carried unanimously. Okay, now it's time for an announcement. Usually newspapers report on things that we say in this chamber, but today I'm going to flip things around a bit because I was reading the Post last week and I came across an article titled "High Rise to Make Subi Fun, McGowan." Curious, I searched Hansard and sure enough there it was, a discussion about how all the shops, restaurants and bars will be lively and fun, like they are in the centre of Sydney and Melbourne. Well, that's great, I thought, but there's something I'd like to clarify tonight, and I'm sure I speak for 17 or 18,000 people who already live in Subiaco when I say that Subiaco is already lively and fun. We've enjoyed varying levels of liveliness and fun for about 126 years as a municipality. Earlier this year, there was a prominent two-page spread in the Weekend West, and it was declared that Subiaco is back kicking goals. It didn't say that we'll be kicking goals sometime in the future. We're kicking goals now. Let me walk you through some recent examples. A week or so ago, we launched Subi Spritz, which is our city's signature social program. It brings a taste of Subiaco, a taste of Italy to Subiaco, and I think 100 VIPs and stakeholders who were present at that launch would say that Subiaco is lively and fun. Billy Bob, our giant public artwork by international artist Thomas Dambo, continues to draw visitors at a steady pace. That is lively and fun in my book. And when I go to have a filtered coffee of locally roasted single origin beans from somewhere in East Africa, or when I have a fresh IPA brewed locally in Hay Street, that to me is lively and fun. So to be clear, today's announcement contains a simple message, and that is, Subiaco is lively and fun. And to decision makers and policy makers visiting Subi for work, come and stay a while. You'll enjoy yourself. Thank you. Okay, so that brings us to the business of the meeting, reports of committees and officers. I've got a possible en bloc vote comprised of items which haven't been the subject of any amendments or alternatives so far. And the possible en bloc vote I've got in front of me would comprise of items C5, C6, C8 and C9. Councillors, just to be clear, C10 is pulled from the en bloc vote at the request of Councillor Powell. Okay, are there any other items to come out of en bloc? Good. A mover and a seconder for the en bloc item, please. Councillor Burns and Councillor Jennings. All those in favour of the en bloc item? The item's carried unanimously. Just in case any observers don't understand what that means, those items have been carried without debate, so council's saved ourselves a little bit of meeting time this evening. Okay, so let's get into the reports. First up is C1, 49 Salisbury Street, Subiaco, a proposal for demolition of an existing dwelling and construction of a two-storey single house, including basement. I note that we've got an officer recommendation of approval and an alternative submitted by Councillor Jennings. Do I have a mover and a seconder for the officer recommendation on C1? Okay, so just to confirm, no one is moving the officer recommendation. Okay, C1 lapses and we'll move to Councillor Jennings's alternative. I've been cut off. Okay, Councillor Jennings will move the alternative and I'll look for a seconder. Councillor Stroud. Councillor Jennings, would you like to talk to your motion?
Thank you, Mayor. Just briefly, I have put reasons, and I hope everyone's read the reasons. But you know what it all boils down to in the end with this application is that it's just, for me, it's too big. It's casting too much of a shadow over some of the outdoor living areas of the adjoining property, 51 Salisbury Street. And that's the basis on which, you know, I would be basing my argument that this application should be refused. It has other non-conforming, non-compliant aspects, but I don't think any of them are to the extent that it would justify a refusal. So just briefly, some of the arguments by staff. There was a curious thing mentioned about the definition of outdoor living area, and that seems to have come from consideration of the minimum outdoor living area for a development, the subject of an application, as opposed to neighbouring properties and overshadowing and solar considerations for the neighbours. So taking that into account, you can look at active and passive spaces in outdoor living areas of neighbouring properties, and they also need not be directly pertinent to the main living area of the dwelling, but it must be readily accessible to be considered according to the definition in the R Codes clause 5.4.2 dealing with solar access to neighbouring properties. So, yep, just to reiterate, I think it's too big, it's casting too much shadow, and that's the reason that I would say we need to refuse this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stroud.
Sorry.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and good evening to everyone. There's a few features I would like to point out on this property. One is the very small lot size of only 321 square metres. This is 129 square metres smaller than the typical R20 lot size of 450 square metres. Now, on this very small lot size, the applicant wishes to build a 2-storey, 4-bedroom home with theatre room, kitchen and scullery, garage, storeroom, and a utility room, all on this very small block. It has been brought to us this evening by the staff with discretion required in 5 areas. 5 areas. Often we deal with 1 or 2 or 3, but this is 5. And as Councillor Jennings has just pointed out, of particular concern is the shadow casting over the neighbour, and that neighbour provided a statement this evening. I also want to bring out the heritage area component of this property. Now, I know that the particular property has been assessed for demolition, and it has no contributory value to the heritage character. Just out of interest, it sadly replaced one of the original homes in this street back in 1945. Now, the heritage area was approved in 2014, and then it was expanded in 2022. But where this becomes relevant is all the homes that are listed in the staff report that seem to sort of justify why we could approve this application. And I think that's very relevant because if we to consider that a lot of these homes were before the heritage area classification, it's very possible they would not have been approved. So my argument is to completely ignore those examples of those dwellings and instead concentrate on the impact of this home and its neighbours. Another point that was drawn out this evening was the fact that a lot of those homes where staff had drawn a comparison were actually on the other side of Salisbury Street. And then in fact, this particular home, 49 Salisbury, and apparently the other homes along that strip have a sunken garden, which emphasises the impact, once again, of this development. So I recommend to you, councillors, that we do not support this DA. Thank you.
Any speakers against, which in essence would mean you're speaking for an approval? Okay, Councillor Burns, you may speak.
Thank you, Mayor McMullen. Look, I greatly appreciate the work that Councillor Jennings put into her alternative, and I'm also delighted that the staff recommendation did not even receive a single sponsor, let alone somebody sponsoring and seconding it. I draw your attention to this matter, but also how this matter is actually affecting what's going on this evening. Now, arguably, I meant to speak about this matter only, but they are joined, okay? And if you want to tell me they're not, then we'll deal with it when you see fit.
As you know, Councillor Burns, you've got to keep your statement relevant, so as long as you do that, I'll be happy. Actually, before you turn the microphone on, just don't touch on our staff's professionalism at all, and I think that'd be the best way forward.
There we go, everybody. We've got this item put forward with, as Councillor Strata said, 5 separate issues beyond, the bigger ones. And I do cite also her comment with regards to what's trying to be built on a block of 321 square metres. Okay, this is just getting silly. But that then relates back to some of the final comments that had been made with regards to the Section 76 problem over on Morgan and what the Welland area, in that what's happening there, okay, and then pushing these sort of, an application of this sort, the part that I thought was ridiculous is that it's got a scullery, it's 321 square metres and they want to have a room to polish their silverware and dust off their china in, okay? Well, this is Subiaco on 321 square metres. Sure, build a house, okay, but do you want to, and by the way, I did look into this, if you've got a scullery, you need a scullery maid and she's got to sleep in the attic, okay? So I'm a little concerned about that too, that the scullery maid's going to sleep in the attic. I didn't even see an attic in the place. But keeping in line with how I'm drawing this to other matters. So we've got an approval here, okay, and a whole bunch of people in the room don't like it. We've got the next item is going to be another approval, and there's a whole bunch of people in the room again, don't like it, okay? We've also got a change of non-conforming, and we've got a whole bunch of people in the room don't like it, okay? And every one of those are being put to us by staff, okay, saying, approve them, okay? And it's almost, I find myself sitting here in a situation where I'm trying to work out how to fight off these approve, okay, with don't approve, don't approve, don't approve. Now, the first one we've done well. Councillor Jennings, nobody put their hand up. Nobody, so the staff's made, has recommended an approval, and nobody is going to put their hand up. And they're not putting their hand up because you guys are here. They're not putting their hand up because it just is wrong, okay? It doesn't matter which way you read it, backwards, forwards, upside down, it's wrong. The next one's wrong, okay? The non-conforming use, it's wrong. What's going on in Section 76, it's wrong, okay? It's also been dealt with incorrectly, okay? We'll deal with that later, okay? But that's not where I want to be as an elected member. I didn't get elected to come in, to be making arguments against recommendations, okay, that sit before me, approve, and I've got a gallery full of people, right, basically worried that their lives are being, I'll say this word, it's overdramatic, are being bloody well destroyed, okay, by what is being recommended by the people we employ. Actually, we don't employ them, they're employed by the CEO. We only employ the CEO, in case you didn't know that. But by the people that the CEO has employed, and they're coming before us, approve, with all these reasons, okay? Well, I'll just leave it at this. I think you've got the general message. I'm not too happy about it. I will stay, but it's not what I signed up for it, and I don't think you signed up for having to show up, okay, to defend your homes against what's being shoved right next to you, or at least 2 houses down the road or something like that. You should be home watching Days of Our Lives or whatever you do, okay? I've got no idea, barbecuing or, whatever takes your fancy. But you shouldn't have to be here, okay? You should be not even worried about what's going to happen to your home and your life and your next door neighbour. And some of you you're very elegant speakers, by the way. You'll be not.
Councillor Burns, are you debating with council or are you speaking to the gallery?
I can look at the gallery.
Well, you're not addressing anyone at the table, as far as I can tell. You said you're about to wrap up, so why don't you make some closing remarks to the council?
Okay, shouldn't be here. They shouldn't have to be here. I'm not looking at them, looking at you, okay? They shouldn't have to be here. Not a one of them. They need to be at home cooking dinner. I mean, there's a girl in there that's 15 or something that's worried about, getting through school and what's happening in a bedroom next door, okay? And what the Good Samaritans are doing. We'll deal with that later, okay? But she needs to be home, studying, not sitting in council, for God's sake, worrying about what's going to happen to her life, okay? Not looking at her. I think she's still over there. I don't know. But
Well, Councillor Byrne, she did make a statement on C3 and we're only on C1. Okay, you've... Yep, okay. Okay, well, thank you for the speech on item C1. Are there any more speakers to item C1? Councillor Kosovich.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. I would like to strongly endorse the alternate recommendation. I've spoken about this previously, and I do agree with the overshadowing, and I did hear the statement tonight about the people on the southern side wishing to have a garden and not being able to because they've lost their light. Also, as touched on by Councillor Stroud, the heritage values here. We've got a very excessively large home sandwiched between two fully restored heritage homes in a heritage precinct. So that's the gist of what I'd like to say about it, and thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Any other speakers on C1? Councillor De Vries.
Yeah, look, again, I think we've all said pretty similar things, but I think the owner of the home came and made some really good points, I think, in regard to the overshadowing. And I think it's the percentage that just struck me as being a bit of a concern, like 43.3%. Look, I'm glad there was adjustment, and you've always got to remember that when people have a vision for what their home should be, it's also a contemporary sort of idea of what a house does and what a house is, and we've got this traditional kind of community with its smaller blocks, very much smaller blocks. And it's a great thing to have these little homes that represent a past history where people had different types of lives that were spent much more outdoors. And we've got to remember that is kind of an established tradition of this community. And nobody's being critical of what the owners want, actually, but it's that number 43.3% overshadowing. And the fact is, the owners have said, yeah, they use the entire garden. So, this is really the issue for me. And what is it next? 75%. Obviously, I am concerned about the incremental creep in what's permitted in the overshadowing, but that's where I was tonight. And when the owners spoke on that, I felt vindicated in my support for Councillor Jennings' alternate. So, thank you.
Any other speakers? Councillor Powell.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Look, I'm not going to say a lot. Generally, I agree with the views put forward by my fellow councillors. However, I don't agree with Councillor Burns' depiction of how planning staff operate. Sometimes we get recommendations that we agree with, and sometimes we get those that we don't agree with. I don't think that was a fair depiction. Thank you.
Any other speakers? I'll call the vote. All those in favour of the... Apologies, it's been too long. Councillor Jennings, did you wish to close? Now I'll call the vote. All those in favour of the motion submitted by Councillor Jennings? I think it's unanimous. Yep, it's carried unanimously. That brings us to C2. We haven't got any... Well, C2 relates to 126 Barker Road, Subiaco, a two-storey single house including basement. We've got an officer recommendation for approval. The difference for C2 is that we don't have an alternative. No. It wasn't carried on block. We haven't had an alternative for refusal submitted. Councillor Kosovich has requested that the item be pulled from on block. So I'll be asking for a mover and a seconder for the officer recommendation on C2. Okay, well, it lapses. So there is no approval for C2. That brings us to C3, 60 Bagot Road. Councillor Stroud, you're moving. Second for C3. Councillor Kosovich. Councillor Stroud.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd actually like to start by asking a question, thank you. And it's through you to the Director of Planning. And it's about the reference in parentheses in the recommendation to mental health accommodation. It's a very misleading and incorrect description. I believe its removal will have an immaterial effect, but I just wanted to ask staff if that was the case and whether it could be changed to a more appropriate term like social service facility or social service and accommodation. Thank you, Mayor.
I'll put the question to the Director and then we'll talk about amendments if necessary. Director Development Services, what's the answer?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. Essentially, the information in the brackets was used initially to inform the community about some information that was in the development application. Its change has no material effect on the approval, so something along the lines of social services and accommodation could potentially fit in there pretty well. So there's no issue on that, and there'd be no change to the use or development should it be approved.
Happy with that, Councillor Stroud? Okay, did you want to speak to the item?
Thank you. First, I'd like to point out that following the briefing forum, I met with rural representatives, staff and other elected members, and this was very useful in a further understanding of the sanctuary and, importantly, the planning issues. I then reached out to the opponent representatives, Jess and Michael Park, but unfortunately they're unavailable to meet with me. I just want to acknowledge to the presenters this evening that rest assured I have read all their information and considered the issues very deeply, as I believe other elected members have done. Excuse me for a minute. Thank you, Mayor. Can we please have the rostrum removed? It usually is removed, and I can see, I'll just take a break there. Thank you. A change or continuation of a non-conforming use can present its own complexity and impacts. And I've experienced this with a prior council determination with Fresh Start, which heroically but sadly was pursued in the Supreme Court. So I'm well aware of how important this decision is this evening. Councillors, the planning proposal we have before us gives us the ability through clause 23.3 of the LPS 5 to consider a change of use application for a non-conforming use to a non-permitted use, where the proposal is considered to be less detrimental to the amenity of the locality and is closer to the intended purpose of the residential zone. Now, proposed is a short-term social service accommodation for young people between 16 and 24 who are experiencing suicidal thoughts. This is a non-medical, early intervention, peer-led, voluntary program that includes agreement to a code of conduct and a critical response plan. The program known as the Century is a collaboration between landowners, the Samaritans and the Rua Community Services, with Telethon Kids Institute providing the research and evaluation. So far, the group has secured $3 million from the state government. Now, crucial to this program and the planning approval is a management plan. And the idea of this management plan is to help ensure that there's a low impact on the residential amenity. And I've referenced Fresh Start earlier. Interestingly, there was no management plan accompanying that approval. Now, considerations of the management plan include, for example, minimising traffic movements and disturbances at night. Since 1975, this has been in office use, and it's been operational with no conditions, completely unconditional use. Councillors, you know that we have been provided with very sound legal advice from lawyers, not planning consultants. We've heard tonight from planning consultants who purport that we are not being legal, have suggested ultra vires, and
You wish to raise a point of order? What's the point of order?
Shortly due what was taking place, and I haven't had a look at it, but at some time after 4 o'clock, we've received by email a legal opinion from the head of McLeod's. Okay.
Sorry, what's the point of order that you're raising about what Councillor Stroud said?
Councillor Stroud has just referred to we've had excellent legal advice. We've got it. Nobody's told us we've got it. Nobody's had a chance to read it that I know of. Right.
Or did you want me to close the meeting to the public for a few minutes so that we can all have a read of the legal advice that we received earlier?
Sorry, but I don't think having a quick read of something, okay.
Okay, well, this isn't a point of order about anything that Councillor Stroud has said.
Well, I apologise that I made a mistake, but I'd just like to note.
Okay, well, it's noted. Councillor Stroud, would you like to continue your debate?
Thank you. I'd like to point out that there's been 2 sets of legal advice. The legal advice concerning this approval came in on the 7th of October, and we received it a good week or so before. There's been a second lot of legal advice that concerns the amendment. I believe it's very important not to confuse the two.
Sorry to interrupt, Councillor Stroud. I'm quite serious that if councillors would like to move and second a procedural motion to close the meeting, I'm quite happy to do that, and the meeting procedures allow it. Well, I just wanted to ask a question first, but go ahead, Councillor Stroud, keep talking.
Thank you. Yes, in the past when we have received late advice, and as I said, it relates to the amendment, so maybe that would be a good time to close when the amendment is presented. But in the past, we've even taken a good 10-15 minutes break as long as councillors have wanted to read recent advice. But the original advice is still very pertinent to the approval of the officer's recommendation, and we've received that in good time. So to finish off, since I've now raised to finish off, I just want to point out that we have been provided with legal advice as against the opponent's consultant's advice, which is not legal. And I think that's very important to understand the difference, which I'm sure the councillors around the table will appreciate that. They may be well-trained urban designers and strategists, but they're not lawyers. I do recommend the amendment put to us this evening by Councillor Powell, and I also note that in one of the statements that the proponent for this DA also supports an amendment of 4 years. I think this would be very important, particularly for the concerned residents, because it gives a sort of boundary of time limit around this program. I'll leave it at that. I think we've got a long debate ahead of us with amendments and alternatives and perhaps going behind closed doors. But I do recommend this. Well, actually, at this stage, I wanted it on the table so we could thrash it out this evening. Thank you. It's just a start to a long debate. Thank you.
Councillor Kosovich.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. First and foremost, this is a legal debate in the first instance, and I accept the legal advice about the non-conforming use from office to community purpose. And no doubt that will continue that debate for some time, but I am settled in my mind that we've reached the right place with that. I'm also comforted by the fact that of the alternative that's going to be presented by Councillor Powell and the checks, the amendment by thank you, Councillor Stroud. The amendment presented by Councillor Powell that will address the checks and balances and the risks through the management plan, etc. But I want to also turn around and look at the people affected here, the parks, whom I've met with, and I've also met with the proponents, and say to you, I hear where you're coming from very loudly. This was not an easy decision for any councillor. No one likes to get involved in areas where people's safety is felt jeopardised. So I feel for you very much. However, on the other side to that, I was a police officer who investigated many suicides, and that had a very detrimental effect on a lot of families. I've seen close up and personal how devastating suicide can be, and I would take it to let you know that why I've wrestled with this decision, because I agree with what we've heard from the proponents. Suicide is everybody's business. We have a role to play. We have a unique opportunity in Subiaco to take on something that has been proven in the Maytree model in London, and I understand there's a second house in Manchester. So that's where I come from with that. It's not easy. None of this is easy, but the end game is going to be the distinct possibility we're going to save young people's lives. And when we've got an escalating suicide rate in this state, with young men dying at 4 times to every female, then I think we have a duty, and that's the way I've approached this. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we get on to amendments and the like, I'll see if there's any speakers against the officer recommendation. You've got a question, Councillor De Vries.
Through you, Mayor, actually to you, Mayor. I actually would quite like to read the legal advice. It arrived at 4 o'clock, and at that time I was driving. So is it possible for us to go behind closed doors to just get up to speed? Or?
Well, if you'd like to move a procedural motion and have a seconder, we can certainly vote on that. Okay, I'll take you as wanting to move a procedural motion. Is there a seconder to the procedural motion? Councillor Jennings. All those in favour? All those against? Well, I've called the vote on the procedural motion, so we'll count that up first. The procedural motion's carried 7-2, so we're going to go behind closed doors to discuss legal advice. Look, Okay, so behind closed doors, we've been discussing the legal advice and we've just voted to come out from behind closed doors, which is why we've got the public back in here. It's been foreshadowed that a further procedural motion is going to be moved, however. Councillor Burns. Is it it's a procedural motion you're moving?
To the procedural meeting laws of 2013 and going to 7.1 permissible procedural motions, subsection A, that the meeting proceeds to the next item of business, which then falls under subsection under 7.5. Meeting to proceed to the next item of business. It goes on there for reasons why we can do it, and I would ask for a seconder that we move to the next item of business.
So a seconder that we proceed to the next item of business as per meeting procedure rule 7.1A. Councillor De Vries, all those in favour of the procedural motion? Votes against? Okay, the procedural motion's carried 8-1. Councillor Hammersley, you were a vote for the procedural motion, weren't you? Yeah. So what that means is that we move on to the next item of business without making a decision on C3 tonight. Now, there's nothing to be read into that. Councillors simply need more time to consider the materials, so the item will be back on the agenda next month. Yep, next month, at the ordinary council meeting in March. Okay, that brings us to item C4. Yeah, if you've got a copy. Okay, item C4. Okay, final approval to gazette our waste local laws. This was not part of the en bloc because it requires an absolute majority. Mover and a seconder, Councillor Stroud and Councillor De Vries. Is anyone going to speak against this? I might call the vote. All those in favour? The item's carried unanimously. Okay, item C7, a new business plan on investments, and absolute majority is required in relation to this item as well. A mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Burns, and was that Councillor Stroud? Anyone speaking against? Okay, I'll call the vote then. All those in favour of C7? C7 is carried unanimously. And that brings us to the final item on tonight's agenda. Item C10, proposed scheme amendment number 2. Councillor Stroud, are you moving? Okay. Councillor Power, do you want to move? Well, look, I'm sure you've prepared some notes. I'm not sure that anyone's going to speak against. Did you want to convince anyone who might still be undecided?
Sorry, yes, thank you. This is a fresh application that's been made, or an appeal, with far more information that was included in the original application that we considered some time ago, last year. So I think it's important then to address this application as it's been lodged with the department. And look, the underpinnings of this application for a private scheme amendment is the losses suffered by the owners of 37 Wayland Road when the Minister determined the property up from them on Railway Road should be zoned R100 as per her enforced LPS 5 modifications. 37 Wayland Road is zoned R15, and the owners have submitted that the zoning change reduced their property value by about $200,000. Now, I don't know how accurate that figure is. I've never seen a sworn property valuation, but I think it's safe to assume their property value was reduced by being next to potentially a 4 to 6 story apartment block. That block has not eventuated, but at some stage it probably will. So this scheme amendment involving 15 properties between Rayland, Morgan and Fortune Street is about them recouping some of the losses that they perceive they've suffered. So look, at that stage, I'm actually going to ask a question of staff, if I may. Is land value a valid planning consideration?
Director, Development Services.
Through you, Matt? No.
Look, I think that sort of summarises it in some ways. I don't even know why we're here considering this application if it's based on an invalid planning ground. So, I mean, why are we even here doing this? But look, I could leave it go at that, but I want to address some of the other aspects if I can. One of the other contentions put forward in this application is that putting R15 next to R100, or the other way around, is not good for proper and orderly planning. But I find that a novel approach, that the opponents are arguing that the government needs to put in transition zones to overcome the poor outcome from their own decision on LPS 5 and the Shenton Park train station zoning. Well, my view is that you don't correct a poor decision by compounding it. Reversing the original mistake would be far better, and it'd be far better for the owners of 37 Wayland Road, but somehow I suspect that's not on the government's mind. I also want to address another matter in the application, that is the site 336 Onslow Road and the neighbouring approved apartment blocks which are R100, being next to an R15 property at 336. Now, look, I can see that the approval of the neighbouring 62 apartments west of 336 has had a detrimental effect on those apartments at 336. But look, 336 is not an R15 block, nor was it when the apartments were approved. It is R100, the same as the neighbouring apartments, and was coded that when the Minister approved the LPS 5. So look, when you're using fundamental issues like that and they're incorrect, then, you know, you've got a problem. The officer's report details other concerns about the representations made in this report, but look, I think, as you mentioned, Mayor, without trying too much patience, after the Minister imposed the LPS 5 modification, she wrote to the City telling it to draw up local planning policies to provide protections for the properties impacted by the rezoning. Now, the City has done this, and tonight we heard from people in the gallery of how they'd contributed to the community working groups to assist with the drawing up of these policies. The City used the templates provided by the Department of Planning, so everything was strictly by the book. Then it was sent back to them for comment. This community involvement was important, according to the government, for residents' faith in the planning process. The community, the council and the administration have done all they can to comply with the government's advice. Now we're being asked to respond to what's the equivalent of a spot rezoning of an entire city block. I can't see how that can be regarded as proper and orderly planning. We've done all that the government and the department said. I just hope that we haven't been misled, because, as the Minister has avowed, community confidence in the planning process is paramount. So I'll leave it go at that. Thank you.
Does the seconder wish to speak?
Thank you. Yes, I did actually really enjoy reading this submission. It was so well done. I'd like to compliment the staff on that. It's an excellent, professional, very conclusive response. Well done. It highlights the fact that TPS 5 and our local planning policies are fully consulted, that they're contemporary documents, that they were approved by the Commissioner and by the Commission and the Minister. They are compliant with the state planning framework, and importantly, we exceed the city's 2050 target by 2,300 dwellings. There's no need to do these transition zones on any grounds of meeting our Perth and Peel targets. In recent times, the city has approved 10 DAs involving apartment blocks, and that has created 570 dwellings just in the last few years. Now, relevant to the Section 76 submission is the interface of the high and low density. Our local planning policies require the high density to step, this is really important, our local planning policies, this is to sort of cater to this interface, they require the taller development to step down in building height and increase the setbacks to ensure an appropriate built form transition. That's why we don't need to have these proposed transition zones. Now this local planning policy was developed with a community group, and it was also tested by our design review panel. Most importantly, which this submission brings out, or the response to the applicant's submission, is the encroachment on our character areas. And this is going to have a really devastating effect. And I wanted to just refer to, actually use Her Honourable Minister Safiotti's reference at the recent State of the Future lunch last week, when she referred to Subiaco's beautiful areas. That's exactly what this sort of transition zone suggestion would impact on, Subiaco's beautiful areas. Now, before I conclude this, there are two issues that I feel are left to address. One is the statement by Sarah Hops of 36 Morgan Street. And where hers is in particularly relevant is that she said, quote, "We are in exactly the same position as the owners of 37 Wayland Road, as we live directly behind the house, and we too are in the interface of R15 with R100 zone land." And she goes on with an excellent statement. And I just wondered if there was room in this response to actually highlight in particular that statement. I'm sure probably all the statements are going to be included in the submission from tonight. I suppose that's a question first. Are the statements going to be included in the response? Thank you, through you, Mayor.
Mr. Petrovsky.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor, because we didn't have any statements at the time that the report was prepared, ordinarily we can't write them in, but we would be intending to forward all the statements as an attachment to the submission to DPLH.
May I suggest if there's any way of actually drawing out Sarah Hopp's statement, because she actually is against this proposal and yet shares exactly the same impact, would be worthwhile. The second issue I'd like to raise, and I had a sort of a bit of a correspondence with the Director of Planning this afternoon, was over really what motivated this application by Connie and Michael of 37 Wayland, and that really was a perceived loss of property value. I have some memory that this was in the strategic planning report, But in our letter and response, we have not addressed that at all. In consideration of that, our director has actually proposed something that he could include in the letter, around the letter from the CEO to the Director General. In the 4th paragraph, we're referring to the spot zoning, and I just wondered if it's possible to put that up. Thank you, and just see if everyone's sort of happy about it. I'll read it.
Was that a question?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I suppose the question is first, is it possible for the Director of Planning just to put up that small paragraph, because I believe it would address this particular issue very well.
Okay, governance are just going to... Oh, we're not going to be able to see the wording, are we, on this screen tonight? Well, I think we're making amendments on the fly at this stage, Councillor. That would be my only concern. Well, I mean, you can scoff, but that's what you're doing.
An amendment on the fly sounds far more dramatic than what this actually is. And it's often done in meetings. So this is not too sophisticated or challenging. Can I at least read it before you make a decision whether you...
Well, sure, but I'm happy for you to read it, but just bear in mind that what Councillor Powell has moved and you've seconded is that the draft response be sent to the Minister or the WAPC, so it could be problematic if we start changing it at this point, but tell us what's on your mind and we might be able to find a way around it.
Thank you. I'll just wait actually till you've had advice.
Well, look, why don't you tell us your idea, and if we wanted to be squeaky clean with our meeting procedures, I might ask someone else to move and second your idea, Councillor Stroud.
Okay, the idea revolves around addressing this, the fact that the motivation really behind this application was a perceived increase in the loss of land value, and this is not a planning consideration. That's why it's important. So this is how it reads. The City understands that the pursuance of this proposed scheme amendment may be in relation to a perceived reduction of property values. In response, the City considers that property values is not a valid planning consideration and has based its assessment of the proposed amendment on the merits of the proposal and the strategic planning framework as relevant.
So, Mr Petrosky, if you can deal with it administratively, we'll leave it to you, but if we need a move and a seconder for an amendment, the meeting procedures are pretty clear that anyone except the mover and seconder of the original motion is able to move an amendment. Did you want to comment first, Director, or not?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. Look, we have no issues with that wording being included. It's only the mechanism on which Council wants to approve it, so whether they'd like to resolve to put it in the letter or we do it, it's probably cleaner if it's an amendment and a resolution and to include it by Council.
I think there was some support on the other side of the room for the amendment. No? Okay. Councillor Jennings?
I was going to say, I think I do support the amendment, but because it was actually a question I was going to ask myself tonight, the same issue about if the value issue is raised in the application, it should be addressed. But if it's not raised, then don't raise it.
Okay, so we'll take you as moving the amendment. Is there a seconder for the amendment? Does anyone want to speak against the amendment? You want to speak against it? Okay, Councillor Jennings, did you want to say any more about the amendment? I'll ask you in the second or two before Councillor White has a chance to speak against the amendment.
Maybe just to explain, it would be very good to make it clear that if the minister's going to base her decision on anything around value, and if the application raises that or adverts to that, then or the supporting documentation, then I would strongly recommend that we rebut that and just remind the minister. We've reminded her in all the other sections. We've got an attachment saying these are the proper grounds on which you should be looking. These are the criteria you're meant to look at. So I don't see why you wouldn't want to emphasise not to, not please don't consider this, but more to the point, maybe that it's an improper basis for the application in the first place. And I don't really see what could be the damage in mentioning that, but perhaps staff can advise that there's some negative to it, but you didn't before, so okay, that's all.
Councillor Hammersley, did you wish to speak to the amendment? Councillor White, speaking against the amendment.
Thank you. Just to be clear, I'm completely in favour of the proposal that we have in front of us. It's the amendment I have a concern with. In my support, I was hoping to second the proposal that Councillor Stroud got in there before me. And in supporting that, I wanted to be very clear that I accept that the proponents, I guess we call them, who are making the proposal, have every right to do this. And as I understand it, I think they've become pretty unpopular as a result of this move, and that's life, I guess. But also, as I understand it, there has been a fairly untoward criticism levelled toward them, and to be honest, we heard some of that tonight. So I think I want to respect the rights of the people who are right next door to what's going on to make this, to do what they've done. They've got every right. My concern is we're now going to go into their motivation. I don't think we should preoccupy ourselves what their motivation is. Maybe it is about, and they have cited the issue of the land value, but their argument is quite different, I think. Now, I support what we came up with in May last year. I think we should stick with that. I'm kind of disappointed that we have to go to another debate about this topic again, because I think what we said in May last year holds. I'm very concerned that we're going to make suggestions about their motivations. Unless we are 100% clear that this is their motivation, I would not suggest we make an amendment of this sort.
Well, we're going to have to vote on it, and I'm just not entirely clear what the wording is, and we don't have a screen in front of us. Could governance email round the exact wording of the amendment before we call a vote? In the meantime, Councillor Burns, did you wish to speak to the amendment?
Firstly, I'm in total agreement with not only the comments that Councillor Powell said, but I also have a great appreciation for his riding shotgun over this thing, not without acknowledging Councillor White, but there's no doubt that the work that Councillor Powell's put into it is remarkable. But beyond that, as to the comments that have just been made with regards to this amendment, I mean, I'm going to take it back to as far as this minister's concerned and who's advising this minister, right? I'm against it, but we need to keep this simple and keep it simple, stupid, okay? So that we're just saying why it's no, not adding a whole bunch of other stuff in there, because the reason we've got a 24-storey building, okay, at the end of Rockaby Road, is because we told the minister, okay, when they asked, what do you think about 16 stories? And instead of coming back and saying, we'll take 12, we said, shove it up where the sun don't shine, and make it 8, and consequently we got 16. If we'd have come back and said, make it 12, I can promise you, right now there'd be a 12-storey building there, not a 24-storey building there. So let's not, let's not waken the giant, okay, and just keep this as simple as possible down to technical reasons that the acting director can deal with, right, and leave it at that without drawing emotions or anything else into it. This is I'll say this: planning falls into two things, and a lot of people don't understand this. It's art and it's science. Okay, it's science when Nigel Satterley's building 3,000 houses. Because he needs a railroad, he needs a train station, he needs train tracks, he needs a shopping centre and all this sort of stuff. When you're dealing with these smaller matters, like changes of use, other things like that, it's art, okay? We're at the art end right now, not the science end. So let's just keep it as simple as possible why we think it's wrong without delving into any emotional arguments whatsoever. I see Councillor Kosovic falling into an agreement. I know other people see that they want to go hard at it, but I tell you, the harder you go at this minister, right, she's going to come back 10 times harder. And tell you what, she's got a lot more than 10 times more stroke than you got on this one. So let's not beat the giant. That's my point. Thanks. Bye.
Yeah, okay, look at a personal explanation about something that's been said about you, Councillor Stroud.
Yeah, I just want to make a point. This is not about going hard to the minister. I want to make that very clear. Look, the reason I raised this was because we were responding to all the arguments put forward by the strategic planning people. Now, I know another elected member thought that a comment was made in their proposal. If it wasn't, I'm happy to withdraw this idea.
So I'll ask a question of staff. Yeah, if it was, then you're happy to withdraw.
If it was raised, then I believe we should address it just like we have addressed every other argument that has been put forward.
Okay. Question, Director, Technical Services. I'm reasonably... James can answer it if he wants to. He hasn't said anything tonight, I don't think. No, my question is for the Director of Development Services. I'm pretty certain we've got written correspondence that says that from these applicants saying that the reason they are doing this is because of perceived property value. Is that your recollection, and would the city have a record of such correspondence?
Thanks, and through you, Mayor. In the Section 76 proposal that was put to us, we didn't receive anything that said that this is on the basis of the property values. There have been other statements and emails received in that regard. However, they didn't actually form the package that came to us to respond to, which is why when we prepared a draft response, we didn't actually we didn't address that matter because it wasn't raised. But it has been raised in other commentary, in perhaps other emails that have been sent to us that they may be a purpose to it. Again, focusing on the facts and the planning merits of the proposal, that's what our response has been based on. Whether or not elected members in council feel the need to raise a separate issue about planning values, I don't think it's going to materially impact the city's response in a planning sense.
So just to pick up on that last point, in your opinion, would the inclusion of this additional wording help, hinder or have no effect on the strength of our response to the Section 76 representation?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. Look, I don't believe it will have any material effect.
Councillor Jennings. Are you speaking or asking a question? Seeking some clarification.
There we go. Just a point of clarification. that the motion or the proposal I thought that I mentioned was, or put up was, if it was mentioned in the application, then we should address it. So that actually is what I said. So so that's all. I'm just clarifying that point. Thanks.
Okay. So look, I don't know how many people have their emails in front of them, but the amendment wording that's been circulated is wording which would be included in the response. Councillor Jennings, is that starting to diverge from what you understood you were moving, or are you just wanting to explain the reason you moved the amendment in the first place?
I'm not sure about that. We've had an explanation, and maybe we've had an explanation, and I'm now thinking it's not necessary any amendment at all. But anyway, that still has to be put to the vote, doesn't it?
There was a seconder. Councillor Hammersley seconded the amendment. And just to be abundantly clear, if the amendment is carried, the wording which was sent around to us all by email at about 8:39 p.m. this evening will be the wording that forms part of the city's response.
Excuse me, I thought it was Councillor Jennings that seconded.
No, Councillor Jennings moved.
Yes, sorry. Yep. Getting tired over here.
Okay, I'm going to speak briefly to the amendment, and I think we should include it. It's relevant information. The city can justify it based on records in our system, so why not include it? So that's an indication of how I'm going to vote. So I'm entering the debate, I suppose, in foreshadowing that. Are there any final speakers on the amendment? Sure, Councillor White.
So if we vote on it and we're still voting on the, just the procedure, we're still voting on the substandard one after this. Gotcha.
Did you say the substandard one?
Substantive.
Tell us how you really feel. Okay, I'm going to... Now, we don't close on amendments. You want to speak to it now? Sure. Sure. Councillor De Vries speaking to the amendment.
Look, I don't think if it gets put in, it will be considered. I think the considerations for how to issue is, whether to change the zoning won't be based on that. And I have a feeling the community may already be pretty angry with this proposal. So I just sort of want to tone it down a bit and leave it out, because I think we've done quite a good job, and I think that the evidence is pretty clear in our local planning schemes that we've done a lot to improve the outcomes for the residents. So I'm hoping that it just can be left out, really. I feel that sort of an extra thing like that doesn't really make any difference.
Councillor Hammersley. Question, speaking to the... Oh, you wouldn't be speaking to the amendment. I suppose it's a question.
Well, I didn't get a chance to speak to it, as I recall, as the seconder.
I don't know how that happened. It must be my fault. Please go ahead and speak to the amendment.
Yeah. I was happy to second, because I wanted to hear more about the idea. And having heard that the application before the Minister does not include a reference to land value, I'd actually be quite comfortable to leave this out. I am persuaded by Councillor White's words. I think telling the Minister how to do her job when that is not before her isn't really going to be helpful to her or us. So I'd be inclined not to include it. Thank you.
Councillor Powell.
Yes, look, as I have not spoken, look, I think drawing the attention that the application may include as a very basic substance an invalid planning. I think that's fundamental to our response. I think I said in my sort of opening, along the lines of, why are we here if this is not a valid? And I think it's sort of foundational to any response.
I think everyone who needed to speak has spoken on the amendment, so I'm going to call the vote. All those in favour of the amendment? Okay. It looks like the amendment is lost 3-6. Okay, so we're left with the original officer recommendation. I'm looking for any other speakers. Councillor White.
Here we go. All right, just to say that yes, I support the proposal. I'm grateful to the staff for the work they've done in responding to the Minister. Again, I think I've already said about the issues of the rights of the proponents to raise what they have, and but I really stand by our discussion and agreements that we had in May last year. I think we need to really hold firm to the decisions that were made then before my time, but in terms of what this will do for the quality of life for people in that area, I think we have a very strong sense of where the community sits with this, and I think we should continue to hold that line. And I will echo Councillor Burns' comments around Councillor Powell and just thank him for taking the lead on a lot of this in the last few weeks. I'm certainly very grateful of that. Thank you.
Any final speakers to the item? Councillor Powell, did you wish to close?
Yes, look, I will. The LPS 5 is up for review in 2025. So, look, if there's going to be time to address potential changes, maybe that's the time to do it. At the moment, I don't think the way this application is framed is equitable or would result in proper and orderly planning. So, and I'll leave it go at that. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll call the vote. All those in favour of the recommendation on item C10? The item's carried unanimously. Okay, that brings us to the end of our agenda. There's no further business, so I declare the City of Subiaco Ordinary Council meeting of the 21st of February 2023 closed at 8:53 p.m. Thanks very much, councillors and staff.